نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار على سبيله إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So continue our lesson inshallah tabarak ta'ala, which is a discussion of those ahadith in the book Bulugu Maraam by Ahadeeth ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, and we discussed those ahadith in Kitab as-Salat, and more so concerning Bab Sifat al-Salat, regarding the description of the Prophet Islam pray, and also how we should pray. So in the last lesson we're discussing matters regarding Al-Faatiha and some matters relating to Al-Faatiha, regarding reading of Faatiha being wajib or not, in which of the rak'at, also the people behind, those praying by the Imam, what they are supposed to read from Faatiha or not. So we have gone through those discussion, and also said Ameen behind the Imam. So we discussed those matters. So now today inshallah ta'ala we'll move on to the hadith that is discussed next to the hadith of Abdullah ibn Abi Awfa. That's where we'll stop. The hadith of Abdullah ibn Abi Awfa. قال جاء رجل, that a man came to the Prophet Islam
and said, I cannot memorize anything from the Quran, so teach me something which can be a substitute for me. He said, say Subhanallah, Allah is free of imperfections, Walhamdulillah, and praise is to Allah, Wa la ilaha illallah, and there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah, Wallahu Akbar, and Allah is the most great, Wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-azim, and there is no might and no strength but in Allah, the Most High, the Supreme. Reported by Ahmed, Abu Dawud, and An-Nasa'i, and Ibn Hibban, Ad-Darakutni, and Al-Hakim graded it Sahih, authentic.
Yes, that's the hadith that the author rahimahullah, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, mentions regarding this discussion regarding, and this hadith is more so to discuss concerning the matter regarding that man la yuhsin shay min al-Quran, the person who does not, is the person unable to read anything from the Quran, either the person hasn't memorized Faatiha or anything from the Quran, or in cases, for example, a person who's a new shahada, a person is new to Islam and haven't yet memorized anything from the Quran, but he has to pray, or her. What then should be done in their salat as to what is to be said or read? Or a person who maybe is unable to grasp the language, for whatever reason he unable to grasp the language of Al Arabiya. So what in such cases, what is the person to read in their salat? So as we mentioned previously regarding that, there's certain things that is a must to be read regarding Al-Fatiha. Now, but if the person is unable to read his Fatiha or anything else, then what is to be done in such cases? So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, in still discussing matters relating to Al-Fatiha and what some of the offshoot masahil that relates to it, and he mentioned now this hadith, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Abi Awfa, as read, that a person came to the Prophet Islam. So he mentioned Ja'a Rajul, in Nabi Islam, that a man came to the Prophet Islam. In most cases you find that he mentioned that aman. So they mentioned, and as for this person you have some discussion as to who is this person, but in general, as we mentioned, in the isnad, if it is said a person said upon another person, then that makes the hadith, can make the hadith daif if the person is unknown. So if a person, for example, in the isnad, if a person was to say, and one person, a man narrates upon another person, Abu Hurairah, if we don't know who that person is, because it's mubham, unknown, then that can make the hadith weak, because we are unclear as to who this individual is. Right? Clear? With me? Then, but you find a second case, because it says, Ja'a Rajul, in Nabi Islam, a man came to the Prophet Islam. This is in the isnad. Now this is in the matan, the actual hadith itself, the body of the hadith. Now, the text of the hadith, it doesn't have any impact on the hadith regarding its authenticity. So it says you have two situations. A person has been mentioned who's unknown, mubham, right? His name, who he is. If that is the case in the isnad, then that's a problem. Until we can identify who this person is. a man said or a woman said. So until we're able to identify that person in the isnad, then that can weaken the isnad hadith. But the second scenario is a person mentioned, a man, a woman, and unknown who this person is in the text of the hadith, the belly of the hadith. It doesn't weaken the hadith or anything. Clear? So, no. The hadith narrated, it's just a person being mentioned, but whether he's known or unknown, it have no relative, not in a negative way, but doesn't have no significant implication on the weakness of the hadith. Because it's in the text itself. But in the isnad, then it's a problem. The person needs to be identified. But in the text, the body of the hadith, then that's not necessarily the case. And sometimes from the ulama of hadith or explain hadith, that they'll try to identify who the person might suggest or try to mention by various narration or who they think this person who's being discussed, who he is. Now, sometimes they are on point, and sometimes it's just suggestions who the person may be. So that's concerning that particular matter. Then the hadith is main, as we mentioned, as I mentioned, that a person, this man, قال إني لا أستطيع أن آخذ من القرآن شيء. So the person came to the Prophet and explained to him his condition or situation. I'm unable, meaning أخذ, to take anything from the Quran, meaning I haven't memorized anything from the Quran. It could be that the person said, it could be a case where the person unable at that stage where the person is new to Islam, or at an age where the person is very old in age, or a person that is unable to master or grasp the language of Arabiya. So whatever the case is, the person unable to attain anything from the language. Then I mentioned, Allimni ma yudziyani. Teach me what is sufficient for me. So it shows regarding this matter concern to know that one, regarding that the Prophet now in the maqam as a teacher, in the position of a person who's a teacher and a person who's a mufti, that a person who, as we mentioned, Faatiha is a must be read. But you might find cases where for a particular individual is something which is difficult for them and they need some substitute, they need something to function because they must pray. So the Prophet was going to give a fatwa, and that fatwa is to this person, anyone else who's in that situation or anyone who's similar to him. But not every fatwa in all cases something apply case by case. Regarding fatwa after the Prophet ﷺ. With me? But the fatwa of the Prophet ﷺ in most cases apply across the board. For anyone who's in a similar situation as the person who's posing a question or dealing a particular case. So the person kind of somewhat and shows concern in the companion or people who are genuine and wanting to learn. So the person came to the Prophet ﷺ and told him, this situation, I cannot read the Quran or find it difficult. Give me something, teach me something that we can replace, that was a substitute for this. So Islam, then I mentioned, فقال, that the person should say, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, La hawla, La quwwata illa billah, Al-Azim, Al-Ali Al-Azim. So I mentioned that particular supplication was somewhat, as then he's talking to a person who knew Arabic to some extent. So he gave him this as a substitute for what is to be read in the Quran for those who are unable. Then Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentioned those who collected the hadith, those who collect the hadith. As for this hadith, they mentioned that this particular hadith for some of the ahkam that can be taken from this particular hadith. So as for the hadith, it kind of shows that the person who hasn't at the moment or unable to memorize from the Quran, more so Al-Faatiha, then he can say something as a substitute, not in English as we mentioned before, but he's saying what he can in Arabic. Even so, the person can say this entire supplication. He said at least a part of it. So that's concerning the hadith. It shows that that's a substitute for the person able to read. And also the ulama mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَقْرَهُ مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. Read what is within your ability from the Quran. So the person can read Faatiha, but they know something else, they can use that as a substitute. If they don't know anything at all, then they go to this supplication. Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, and they can use of this as a substitute for not being able to memorize anything from the Quran. So that's concerning this hadith, it shows this particular point.
Sorry, how many, is this the same case if they're being led or they're reciting by themselves? Because if somebody's doing it by themselves, how many times are they supposed to say that something?
To be discussed, one more time to be discussed. If the person, if a case like that, if a person unable doesn't know anything of the Quran, and he has to pray by himself, and he prays by himself and lead himself. So either person will be an imam for himself, but he's praying or he be the person following others who already know something of the Quran. So it goes back to the principle regarding if you find a case where there's brothers that are there and want to be the imam, choose the one who know the most Quran.
No, for example, if you're leading now and I've just taken Shahada and I don't know anything and it's a quiet prayer, I'm going to be saying the supplication, which is an easier case. But if I'm praying at home by myself and I only know that supplication, how many times am I supposed to say it?
To be discussed. But general consent is said once. Some ulama mention that should be repeated, but there's no delil that it should be repeated. So some mention repeated at least, some say 3 times. But there's no delil about repeating. The person will say it once and that's sufficient. As in this case, the Prophet only told a person, mentioned as a once, and that becomes what is sufficient, and that's sufficient for the person. So repeating it once, that's sufficient. So that's concerning that matter. So as we mentioned, that it is to be read once. I would say that would substitute for Al-Fatiha. So that's concerning the case of the person who's, in this particular case, the person unable to read anything from the Quran. Some other matters that relates to Al-Fatiha. But okay, we discussed some of those matters regarding the hadith that will come next. So this hadith is meant to discuss this matter. This hadith is meant to discuss concerning that in the case of a person unable to read Fatiha, then the person would repeat Subhanallah. So depending if the person can combine all that is mentioned here, then it is done. If the person can also say Subhanallah or Allahu Akbar, then whatever that he can do from this, depending on the person's situation and circumstance. But this hadith shows that the person is not to pray, but he prays, but using this supplication. He used this particular supplication, but salat is not per se that is to not to perform the salat, and that's not the case. He's to perform the salat, and he used the supplication that are mentioned in this particular hadith. So it's concerning that particular hadith regarding this particular matter.
Is there a certain time period you have to learn Al-Fatiha by?
No, there's no concern in terms of as soon as he's able.
Okay.
You understand? Learning for people sometimes may varies. You understand? Some people are very quick, and some people may take a little more time. But effort, we say, with this, effort should be made for the person to learn Fatiha or to be taught Fatiha. Until you have learned Fatiha, then he reads this supplication in his salat or her salat. But said also, yes, that the person should be encouraged or taught Al-Fatiha. And today you have different methods of teaching, online and offline. So that's concerning this particular hadith. We go to the hadith that follows.
Narrated Abu Qatada radiallahu anhu, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to lead us in prayer and recite the first 2 rak'ah of Zuhr and Asr prayers, Surah Faatiha and 2 other surahs. And he would sometimes recite loud enough for us to hear the verses. He would prolong the first rak'ah and would recite in the last 2 rak'ah Surah Faatiha only, agreed upon.
It is next hadith that author rahimullah, Imam Ibn Hajar rahimullah, that mentioned this particular collection with the hadith of an Abi Qatada. قال, they mentioned that the Prophet عليه السلام يصلي بنا, that he used to pray with us ويقرأ في الظهر والعصر في ركعتين أوليين بفاتح الكتاب وسورتين. And he mentioned al hadith. So this hadith they mentioned regarding concerning that describe concerning كيفية القراءة في الصلاة, how one is to recite in the salat, how one go about reciting the salat, and to what the length of the person's recital, Then he mentions hadith in the Bukhari, muttafaqun alayh, indicating hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. So as for the ahkam that relates to this particular hadith, that the ulama, they mention the hadith or the salawat al-khamsa, that they fall into either one, that a portion that some of them, one is allowed to recite aloud in some rakat, and in others, throughout the salat, the person recite silently. Naam, so for which one we read aloud? In some of the rakat, Fajr, in both rakatain, Maghrib, the first two, and Isha, the first two, and Asr or Dhuhr, they are complete silent. So that's concerning what you said, that ijma between the ulama. There's an ijma, a consensus regarding those salat. Ordinarily, they are prayed in that fashion. The first two rakatain, that a person read aloud Faatiha and a surah. Now, for the ones that are read aloud, and the remaining, anything that comes after the first two, they are done in a silent fashion. Naam, and Dhuhr and Asr, complete silence. So that's an ijma between the ulama regarding this, and the hadith that mentioned this is clear. Then now, as for other more detailed matter, that the person who, the imam, and the person who's praying by himself, that they are allowed, it is permissible for them to read aloud in the salat that we mentioned, that are read normally aloud. So for the imam, so if the person is imam, others behind him, so he read aloud in the one that he's allowed to do so. Or if the person who is praying by himself, there's no one behind him, he's also allowed to pray. He's allowed to pray those salat aloud. Now, whether he's praying at his home or wherever. So that's concerning. Even also the ulama.
Ustad, can I ask a question? In terms of Dhuhr or Asr, if you come to the masjid and you just happen to be on your own, you make the adhan yourself, you make the iqamah yourself, then you go to pray, but you want when people arrive in the masjid that they know that you're doing that prayer so they can join you. Is it okay to do the parts aloud, like the Allahu Akbar, Sami Allahu liman hamida, and so on?
And those bits can be done aloud.
Okay.
And those bits for the person who's praying as the imam, and also the munfarid, also can be done in an audible way. Can be done aloud. And next, aywa. And also this applies concerning that also by way of extension regarding that, also for the munfarid, the person praying by themselves. So also to be discussed more concern that also apply concerning female, if she's praying by herself, a lady, Muslimah, praying by herself, then she can pray what is done aloud. So she pray Maghrib in her home by herself. Now she can pray that as it would normally be prayed by men, right? Or they're between themselves, sisters between themselves praying Maghrib or Isha. Now then one of them who's the imama, then she also can read aloud between themselves. But if they're in the presence of foreign men, then no, or stranger men, then that is not to be done. Nam, or they're close enough. So that's concerning those matters. Some of the ulama, all the position regarding that, the salawat, that the person is the munfarid, praying by himself. The older person, if he reads the salat aloud or silent, it is one and the same for them. He has both options. He can take one of the options. So for example, he's praying Maghrib and he's praying by himself, he chooses to do it silently. they mention that there's no problem with this. Just that if you wish to read it aloud, then there's no problem. They see that about, and that's a view taken by Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and also Ta'us and Ahmed, that the person praying by himself, he can choose to do it silently or aloud in a normal fashion. As for the person praying behind the Imam, the one praying behind the Imam, then such the ones he prayed silently, but he still moves his tongue. So he moves his tongue from turning a Faatiha. His tongue is moved, not to disturb others who's beside him. That he's reading, even though he's behind, he's reading so in an audible way that sometimes can be a distraction for people who are close to him. Then that he should avoid this. Now he should avoid this. But the general thing that is to read silently is salat. And all I mentioned, for him to read aloud, then that is something which is disliked. For him to read aloud, that's the person behind the Imam. It is something which is disliked.
So only the Imam can read aloud.
And Imam, so you have the Imam read aloud. As for those behind, then they should be generally silent.
So the one, it says here Zuhr and Asr, and you sometimes read loud enough for us.
We shall come to that masala. So that's mentioned in the established thing. Then we discuss everything in portion, step by step. Now, then I mentioned regarding that also you have other salat that the person is allowed to read, that the one is allowed to read aloud outside the khamsa salawat, such as Salatul Eid. Then that one also is done aloud by the Imam. Nam, so that one is done aloud. Regarding the Imam will recite aloud Faatiha and the surah behind. Nam, also Salatul, also other salawat concerning. Also another one to be a Salatul Tarawih. Nam, so Salatul Tarawih, that Imam is allowed to read aloud. Nam, also the other one concerning Salatul Istisqa, Salat for the rain. So in those salawat, the Imam, and also Salatul Khusuf, if we have the eclipse. So all those ones, the Imam is allowed to read aloud. Those behind, silent. Nam, and also Salatul Jummah. But that will be discussed as a separate, but Salatul Jummah also is read aloud by the Imam. So all those salawat, that one is allowed to read aloud in those salawat by way of the Imam. As for those behind, then they go silent.
Witr.
Salatul Witr, a discussion between the ulama that some hold that he were not to be very loud nor to be silent, but they give like a permissibility that something can do it aloud and then sometimes go silent, or so for Witr, depending on how the person wants to do it. But not to do aloud all the time or silent all the time. But whichever way.
The same with the sunnah prison.
The sunnah generally and nawafil, that they are done generally silent. So the nawafil was sunnah al-ratiba. So we have various type of sunnah. The one they mentioned here more that are more done by the way of the jama'. So you find that nawafil are normally done as on an individual basis. Or the sunnah al-ratiba are done on an individual. But these are the ones that they mentioned as an example. Are these ones are ones that are done by way of the jama', the imam and others behind. So I mentioned that as for the nawafil in the nahar, during the day, then it's preferred that it's done silently, without khilaf between the ulama. So generally concerning, was said that generally concerning the nawafil, that they're done silently. Then the next situation regarding that they mention, as we mentioned, certain salawat is, and I mentioned that is preferred and concerned that the person reading aloud. Majority of ulama hold that the person reading aloud in Fajr, Maghrib and Isha is something which is mustahab. Something which is mustahab. something which you prefer to be done. Now, so meaning that the person didn't, in those salat, he didn't read aloud, his salat is not considered to be invalid. So in Fajr, he read silently. His salat is not invalid. But you have done khilaf sunnah. You have done something which is opposite the sunnah. So the sunnah is going to be done aloud, but he chose to do it silently. His salat is still valid. Now, less of a reward, but his salat, but the thing is that his salat is not deemed to be invalid.
What if the Imam is silent?
And even if the Imam was to read silently in Fajr, his salat is still valid. Now, but he's gone contrary to the sunnah. He's doing contrary to the sunnah. So I mentioned, Ibn Rajab rahimahullah mentioned concerning al-jahr fima, and the salat that is to be done aloud is of the sunnah mustahab. And the sunnah, and the person who didn't do so, his salat is not invalid. Yeah, some of the ulama who's Ibn Abi Layla, I've mentioned, it stated that he owes the person didn't read aloud in Fajr, those ones to be read aloud, his salat is invalid. But that's not the case. They mentioned that qawl, it is incorrect. That view is incorrect and weak. So the general thing of the qawl of the jumhur of the ulama, that the salat, the salawat, that the person should read aloud in, then that is the sunnah mustahab to be done. But if the person was to do opposite, not read aloud, his salat is still valid, whether the imam or munfarid. Whether the imam or the munfarid. Another matter related to this, the person, as we mentioned, that the person, for example, in Asr read aloud. The person in Salatul Asr decided to go loud. What's the situation with this salat? The person Salatul Asr read the first two rakatain aloud. Faatiha aloud.
Why nobody correct him? We should say subhanallah.
So you went aloud and you said subhanallah and you still continue.
He knows intentionally or?
Is it the same ruling? It's against the sunnah?
So the same thing, that his salat is still valid, but he's doing khilaf sunnah. Nam, he's doing khilaf as-sunnah. And for example, if he was to do it, the Imam in Faatiha, or for example in Fajr, is expected that he is to read aloud, but he's not. So you will be answered to say subhanallah, and he's still going, and you're saying subhanallah, and he's still going. Now, because if you expect him to read aloud, but he's still going, and then he says Allahu Akbar when you do ruku. Now, I says no, then you follow him, and his salat is, and you're to still valid, but said khilaf sunnah. Now, in that case, and just as for the next scenario would be in Dhuhr is Allahu Akbar, then you got to start to read aloud, and then you're saying Subhanallah, Subhan, he's still going.
Does he, when he's told of his mistake afterwards, does he have to make two sajda for
that's aywa, Jade.
Am I going too far ahead?
No, that's coming. That's the emphasis. So said. So in those cases, that Imam did opposite what is expected. And for example, said no, his Imam is cutting off people, try to bring it to his attention by saying Subhanallah, but he still continues. That says no, in both scenarios, that when he's to read aloud, he read silent, and when he's to do it silent, he read aloud. We said his salat is still valid. Now the question now, at the end of it, if he's corrected or people try to correct him, at the end of salat, is he to make sujood sahu? In that case, is sujood as-sahu to be done? Clear? In those cases, go back to what concerned the ulama, all concerned that al-matter concerning sujood sahu, and to be discussed. That some all concerning sujood sahu is to be done when the person have missed something which of the wajibat of salat. So for example, if the person missed one of the, as to be discussed, he didn't sit in the first tashahhud and stood up. So that's considered to be of the wajibat of salat. So they're all concerned that, so the general approach for some of the ulama is that the person, if he misses one of the wajibat of the salat, then he is to perform sujood sahu. If he misses, now the second thing concerning that, he misses of the sunnah of the salat. As we mentioned before, we have matters that are concerned, we have shurut, we have arkan of the salat, pillars of the salat, condition of the salat or prerequisite of the salat. We have the wajibat, the compulsory component of the salat. We have the sunnah of the salat. Now, if he was to miss, I mentioned, if he misses, I'll mention this in the first lesson, remember, if he misses certain of the different things, what's the implication? So I mentioned that if he misses, in this case, of the wajibat, then sujood sahu is done. Now if he misses a sunnah of the salat, and we're saying that reciting Faatiha aloud is what? Sunnah. With me? So if he was to be silent in dhuhr, that's of the sunnah of the salat. If this was not done, in both cases opposite, that the person in this rule, he would not pray sujood as-sahu. He just ended salat.
Say that again, sorry.
If the person was to, for example, he prayed dhuhr and he read aloud and he was corrected, people saying subhanallah, and he still coming, at the end he said assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Now at the end of the salat, before he said that, is he to make sujood as-sahu of error, or he just end normally? We said that because some of the ulama all concerned that that the act of reading aloud or not is of the sunnah act of the salat. Then in that case he is not required to perform sujood sahu. Just end normally. Now, even though some mention that if you miss certain of the sunnah of the salat, then you should perform sujood sahu. Especially those which are established, such as these ones. Reading aloud and not reading aloud are established. Sunnah of the salat, some other person in that case is allowed to make sujood as-sahu. So if you see the imam does it, so whatever he does, follow him. In that case, if the imam is like a faqih, understand, then whatever he does, follow him.
So what's the strong opinion? Should he do it then? He does the opposite, khilaf as-sunnah?
But some of the ulama says that lam yasjud as-sahu. For example, Imam Awzahi, Imam Shafi, Ahmed, in one of the narration, all that, there's no sujood as-sahu upon the person. But you have a view that says that, for example, Imam, that said the person should do sujood sahu. Of those who hold that view, Abu Hanifa, Al-Thawri, and others, Al-Nakhai, or the person should perform sujood sahu. So I said it goes back to the Imam. Whatever he does, he's followed. Whatever he does, is followed.
This would probably cause a problem, fitna in the community. Once when I just came, when I just accepted Islam a few years back, prayed with someone, either Maghrib or Isha, I can remember it was one of the night prayers, and he didn't read aloud. But you knew, isn't it? And a few of us was praying behind him and he didn't read aloud. So he just followed him, but now, you understand, in most of the established imam, you may not find that error. You might more find from a person who is not, he's praying and then people just join him. You with me? So he wants sometimes, and himself is not that maybe confident within himself to read with people behind him. But most imam may not have that issue. He's more concerned a person who's like, just is there, people behind him, and you understand? He's a bit tense. You with me? So, but then said, something is mentioned that we have to the person understanding that even if you find a situation, you know how to react. That you know also how to react. So sometimes it may not occur that often, but at least you know how to react if it was to occur. And also for the Muslim who understand, we said if it may be done by the Imam to teach maybe the people something, and maybe wants to use it as something, an opportunity to open a lesson and to educate the people about this matter. And you have to start to explain. So if you see a situation like that, at least you have some understanding about what's going on, even before the Imam may have explained, before he explains. So for us it's just having that awareness and understanding. And also if we see people doing certain things, we know how to deal and treat them. Not as if in Salah, you go and start to, you understand? You with me? You approach it much more different. Now you have a better understanding, you understand, on the matter. I didn't know that actually.
Consider, remember the case of the hadith of the Prophet of Islam, where that person, the Bedouin, they said, came and urinated in the masjid. Remember that, the hadith. So the man, he came, went to a corner and he urinated. How was the reaction of the companions? Huh?
Really upset.
Yeah, they were upset. They want to, as we said, they want to. Huh? Want to, make want to move on them, isn't it?
Beef with a minute. We do, mate.
Hey, you understand? So the Prophet, he stopped them and can educate everyone, the person who did that act, and also those who, yes, a munkar is what evil person doing, but is knowing how to deal with evil when we see it. How to put things in their proper context. You with me? So the person, anyone to use in a masjid, that's in today's time, you may not come out of the masjid alive. In some masjid, you will not come out alive.
If you're walking with shoes.
If you walk just you will not come out alive. You with me? So that's sometimes because of our own ignorance, how to deal with situation, circumstance. Now, so I said these things just for us to have a general understanding how to deal with things properly. Even as our ulama mentioned regarding this matter concerning what is wajib to be read in the salat. Now, the wajib amount of Quran to be read is Faatiha. The wajib amount to be read in the salat is Faatiha. Anything that after this, then it is considered to be of the sunnah or mustahab. So the least, as the Prophet mentioned concerning la salat illa bi Faatiha kitab, that it shows that the least to be read in the salat by way of the imam, for his salat to be deemed to be valid, the person must read up until al-Fatiha. Anything addition to this, then it's of the mustahab, not wajib, after al-Fatiha. Now, so we said the ulama mentioned concerning the hukum, the ruling regarding reading in the first two rakatain Quran addition to Fatiha, then that is something which is mustahab and of the sunnah to salat, and that's the view of the jumhur of the ulama. So majority of the ulama that what is the required amount to be read in the salat is up to al-Fatiha. Anything addition to this from the Quran, it is something which is mustahab, not wajib. And the person wants to just read Fatiha alone in the first and the second rakah, then his salat is still valid. His salat is valid. And he doesn't have to make sujood sahu or anything at the end of it. And that's the view of the jumhur of the ulama. And it is a hadith of Ubadah bin Sa'id anhu, and Nabi Islam, and the Prophet Islam called, La salat liman lam yaqra bi Faatiha al-kitab. There is no salat for the one who did not read Faatiha al-kitab. So that shows that that's the least to be read, whether by the imam, the munfarid, or those behind. And we discussed concerning those behind before.
So if it's a situation, sorry Stan, if it's a situation like I'm on my lunch break, I've got literally 5 minutes, I haven't got time, I've only got literally enough time to do Al-Fatiha in the required, so that's fine, yeah?
And then that's sufficient.
Okay.
And that's sufficient. So the person, that's it. You have ideal situation and situations, either you have the ideal situation that you read Fatiha and something else.
Mm-hmm.
That's the ideal and the sunnah to establish.
Yeah.
But you might find a person in a situation where the person does read Fatiha or forget, you understand? You read Fatiha and then went straight in, even forget. You understand? Or the person in a tight situation. The person in a tight situation that he doesn't have time much to read beyond Fatiha, then he does that bit and that is sufficient.
Alhamdulillah, because somebody mentioned this to me before, but I haven't heard any hadiths or anything about it now. I've heard it.
So that's concerning that particular.
You said there's no salah without al-Fatiha. Is that the same for janazah? I think some people don't read the al-Fatiha in janazah. What's the correct?
Fatiha is well in Salatul Janazah.
It is correct.
That's correct. Because the Janazah have to be, because it's its own separate salat. Now, it's a separate, you have Janazah because of how it is. Now you have at least 4 takbirat, but in the first, Fatiha is read. So Fatiha is read, and that's considered one of the rukun of Salatul Janazah, reading of Surah Al-Fatiha. What time is the salat?
We'll go about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, 10 minutes. Exactly.
Then we discussed concerning. Hey, that one's a bit. Yeah, I'm noticing that one is a bit. Hey, that one's a bit fast. Or slow. So the next matter, so we discussed concerning that. So generally concerned that the person, we said the sunnah for the person to read beyond Al-Fatiha in the first two rak'atayn. Now, the first rak'ah and the second rak'ah to extend beyond Fatiha. But if the person was just to restrict themselves or only read Fatiha, then that is sufficient. And that recited in both first and second. In those ones, then they will read aloud. In those ones that they are allowed to read aloud. The next method discussed concerning reading is the person to only restrict themselves only to Fatiha, read only Fatiha in the last, what's beyond the last two, or the third. Now, in those ones, well, in any of those salawat, whether the ones that are done aloud or silently. After the first two rak'ah, for example, in Asr and so for example Asr and Dhuhr, now 4 rakat, or Maghrib and Isha. After the first two, is the person only to read Fatiha, or is he allowed to read an additional surah with Fatiha in the last 2 or 1 rakah after the first two? So that's the next discussion between the ulama. Majority of the ulama that they hold that the person is only to read Fatiha in the last 2 rak'atayn or third, as in the case of Maghrib. So they mention that, whether in the silent or in the allowed salat. Now, so in the last 2 or last third, then they are to be done only restricted to Al-Fatiha. And that's the qawl that is said to be upon Ali ibn Abi Talib, from the Sahaba, Ibn Mas'ud, Aisha, Abi Huraira, Jabir, Abi Darda, and others. But so their view is that is mentioned on them only to read Al-Fatiha in the last 2 or the last third. And there's a view that one is allowed to read beyond Fatiha based upon the hadith that is mentioned. Based upon the hadith that is mentioned, that sometimes Islam will read beyond this. So they mentioned, so you have a view of some of the ulama or all that this can be done. So for example, Imam Shafi rahimahullah, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, and others, all that the person is mustahab that a person can read other than Fatiha in the last 2 or third rak'ah, that the person can read other than Al-Fatiha. The person can read other than Fatiha in the last 2 or the last third of those salawat. So we read Fatiha and something else. And that's the view taken by Imam Shafi, and also in one of his aqwal.
Imam Ahmed as well.
And also Imam Ahmed rahimahullah. Even though most of the Hanabila hold that is not something mustahab. So most of the Hanabila, they hold something which is not mustahab, but Imam Ahmed is of a view that it is okay. And of those that the author here mentioned that based upon a hadith that of Abi Qatada, it shows that it can be done. It shows the permissibility that this can be done. So I said, no, the person, it is allowed, but in most cases will be just restricting to Fatiha. If the person wish to go beyond Fatiha, then there's no harm. Especially in a case where you find that rather than just the Imam, you have read your Fatiha, but the Imam is still waiting for him. And seem to be so. Rather than just there waiting in silence, then just read something. Then just read something else other than Al-Fatiha.
So both views are okay.
Hey.
To be able to read or not.
Hey, to read or not, so what's that? Sometimes it can be done. Sometimes it, even more so, can be done. So both the person, if he restricts the Fatiha, that's okay. Or if he wish sometime wish to add something additional to Fatiha, then also that is okay.
And in the Fard prayer, can someone read more? Like if they do Al-Fatiha, I've never heard somebody doing Ikhlas and then doing Surah Al-Falaq. They just do one surah, or they do part of a surah. Is there any particular reason why that is, or is that just customary?
That's restricted to one surah after Fatiha. No, that's the general. Even the Prophet of Islam, there's no more practice regarding. But some mention, but there's nothing that forbids one from doing it. But a general practice is that one surah will be read, or one surah. If the person wants to add an additional surah with Falaq wa Nas, then there's no harm.
I attended one prayer in Jamaat in Dubai, and
I remember in Tarawih time, you're going to find it a lot, especially Kisar Surah.
But this was for Maghrib, and the Imam did Al-Fatiha and then did Surah Al-Ikhlas 3 times.
Surah Al-Ikhlas?
3 times.
Okay, in the same rak'ah?
Same rak'ah.
Okay.
It was deliberate.
That was deliberate. It's something which is, I've never experienced that. Normally, for example, a person read Al-Falaq wa Nas, 2 separate surah in one rak'ah, then there's no harm. Even to be discussed in the Prophet that he read that he read it in the first rak'ah and then read it again in the second. So repeating the same surah in the following rak'ah, then that's not a problem. But reading the same surah repeatedly in the same rak'ah, then something to be looked into. Something to be looked into.
What about the order of the surahs in the Quran? Some people they say you should read in the right order, as in from Faatiha all the way to Nas.
That's a general practice, but to go outside that, there's no harm. In concern, so find, for example, one of what we have, they said, now follow the Musaf regarding what we have today, in that order. So the person do it, and there's no harm. Even, for example, for Al-Jum'ah, which comes first? Al-Ghashiyah or Al-Ala? Which comes first?
Ala, okay.
Which comes first?
Ala comes first.
Come first? Aywa. That's the case?
Yes, that is the case. That's definitely
Ala
the
comes
case.
before Al-Ghashiyah.
And then Al-Fajr is next.
Check.
Let me check them off.
Ala is, if you're coming from Baqarah to
From
Nas,
Baqarah.
Ala is
From Baqarah.
Yes, Ala first.
Ala come first, then Ghashiyah.
Yes. Naam.
I'll have a look.
Yaqeen.
Now you're making me laugh.
Yeah, Surah Al-A'la, then Al-Ghashiyah next.
طيب. So, that's but if you were to do it other way around, then there's no problem. You understand? To follow the general sequence, you have an next matter, that's the next, but to change it around, then there's no harm. You understand? To read something before the other in their order, then there's no harm. The main thing a person reads something from the Quran. As for the order, it's not per se a must to stay within the order as they are in the Quran.
I think certain madhabs are strict with that. They expect it has to be done, because I was in the presence of people and somebody didn't do it in the order that it is today, and this person with that madhab went mad.
No.
No, you have to do it in this, you have to...
A view may be there that it's preferred to be done, but the person doesn't do it. It doesn't invite the person's salat. Because that one, you have a matter regarding that goes back to the order that we have the Quran in today. They find some companions before that their Quran order was different from what we have today. You ain't with me. So before the order became something they know united upon this order, but before, so someone reads certain things, certain surah out of the secret that we become, that is known to us today. So, as I said, that some may say it's preferred, but as I say it's wajib, then no. And the person coming back then, no.
Is this a good stopping point? Is this a good stopping point? Because we've got like less than a minute until
that's a good stopping point then. So we continue inshallah until next 15 or 10 minutes.
What time are you going up to?
What time is it now?
9 o'clock.
About 10, minutes?
15 minutes, yeah.
Inshallah. Gonna end off some of the masail that they discuss. As the next hadith is more so discussing concerning miqdar al-qira'at fi salat. What is to what extent or what should be read in particular salat. So we discussed that. So they discuss regarding that off from the hadith that we just mentioned, that also serve as a proof regarding that the first two rak'atayn, that they're normally longer than the ones that come after. So ones that are first usually longer than the ones that comes after. Then also Masjid they discuss that the author here he mentioned, and now rahimullah he discussed the matter. So the question: person in salat, he reads start, and he reads a surah, then he read Faatiha. What's the hal of his salat? What's the situation with salat? The person, he started salat, he first read a surah, then after he completed, then he read Al-Fatiha, then he continued normally. What's the situation with that salat? Is it valid or invalid or?
I'd say it's the same as if you read out loud when you shouldn't.
You will get this one.
Going back to that hadith, as long as you read to Faatiha, then it's fine.
Khilaf al-Sunnah, hey. So what he did is, salat is still valid, but he have gone Khilaf al-Sunnah.
Yeah.
Now, because he still read Fatiha and he still read Al-Fatiha, but he went, the order is a bit different. So now, rahimahullah, he mentions that. So Imam Nawawi, rahimahullah, he stated that as mentioned by, as in Al-Um, and as alayhi akthar al-ulama.
So you have to make the sujood sahu if you do that? Or
And that doesn't make sujood sahu. Doesn't make sujood as sahu. And even I think, from what I can recall, even Shaykh bin Baz, rahimahullah, also mentioned something of that. That if a person was to read a surah, then after read Fatiha, then his salat is still valid, contrary to the order the sunnah is established, and he doesn't have to read Al-Fatiha, make sujood sahu, because at the end he still read Fatiha, and again he doesn't have to read, when he finished Fatiha, then he doesn't have to again read another surah after, he can just go straight into ruku. So you have that masala. What I mentioned regarding, the question that you posed, as I mentioned concerning al-jam bayna suratayn fil rak'ah, the person who wishes to read more than one surah in one rak'ah. That's concerning the normal surah concerning either farida or nafila, but more so the discussion regarding in the compulsory salat. Like in the nafila, that for example tarawiyah, we'll find this being done, but that's a salat which is of the nafila or the sunnah of salat, or sunnah salat, not per se wajib, so at tarawiyah. But the case regarding a person reading a farida, compulsory salat, and he read 2 surah in the same rak'ah. Is this jahiz or not? Ibn Rajab rahimahullah, he mentioned أكثر علماء على أنه لا يقرأ الجمع بين سورة في صلاة المفروضة. That he mentioned that majority of the ulama are of the view that it is not disliked for a person to read more than one surah in the compulsory salat, in one rak'ah. So it could be done. But it's normally concerning separate surah. The salah that you mentioned, the same surah being repeated. Then that requires some form of fatawa. And I'm not qualified. So that's concerning. So reading different surah, that is permissible. But as for, and I mentioned, you find that narration regarding who have done it from the Salaf concerning Umar and his son Ibn Umar, and also Umar ibn Abdul Aziz and Alqama and others. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he also that act, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and others, all that is something which is disliked. But the majority all that is something which is not disliked to be done, if it is done. But Abu Hanifa and others all that is something which is disliked. Allahu Alam, but the qawl of Jumhur seems seen as enough from the Sahaba, Umar, Ibn Umar and the likes, that they did it, then it shows a degree of permissive. If it is done, then that's okay. And we mentioned that the person then to repeat the same surah in the following rak'ah. So whatever he read in the first, he went and repeated again in the second rak'ah. What's the ruling under Muslim matter? I mentioned Ahadeeth in Abu Dawud, that and the call of Jumhur, There's some concerning Ibn Rajab rahimahullah. He mentioned regarding the hadith in Abu Dawood that a person prayed the Prophet Islam, Rajul min Juhayna, and Nabi Islam Salla bihim al-Fajr. The Prophet Islam that he prayed Salatul Fajr. فقرأ إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها. So he read that surah في ركعتين كلتيهما or كلتيهما, that he read both to that same surah in both rak'ah. And that was Salatul Fajr. He read both those, the same surah in the first and again in the second rak'ah of Al-Fajr. So say based upon that some of the ulama, based upon that, Ahmed and others, all that it shows that it is permissible or could be done, can be done, but a normal practice, separate surah for each rak'ah, separate surah for each rak'ah. But if it is done, then that the person's salat is still valid, and the person, in this case, when a person going contrary to the sunnah, says he done something which is jaiz. So difference between saying something is khilafu sunnah and something being jaiz. Clear? So khilafu sunnah was said when a person go khilafu sunnah. We gave an example before regarding a person reading Fajr silently. Now, but a person in this case, if he was to read a particular surah in Rak'ah al-Ula, the first Rak'ah, then repeat the same surah in the second Rak'ah, we said that is jaiz. Even though the Prophet Islam, in most of the cases that it was done separate in both Rak'ah, separate surah, but he showed in this case the permissibility of this.
As I mentioned this, Sheikh, there was some ikhtilaf with the people in the Masjid the other day. I won't say which one, but anyway, they were talking about someone who led the prayer Salatul Fajr, and he used some small surah. So one man was saying, "Bruv, I didn't even make wudu, and it was finished." So, does it, Fajr, the Salah, the
length,
does it have to be long? Does it have to be long?
And that will be the next discussion, the next Ahadeeth regarding what is the miqdar, the length of the salat regarding each one. So you have a discussion. What's it as a general thing? Now, yes, Fajr normally the recital up to the Prophet normally read up to about 16 ayah. Now, so the longest of the salawat. Now regarding its length. But if it is there, that one is in Zulzula is what? In Fajr.
Yeah.
That's in Fajr. So it shows that, you understand, whatever the reason may be, you understand that it can be done. You understand, sometimes if it is done, then there's no harm. If it is done, there's no harm. So there's no per se need to criticize the Imam if it was done. You understand, if it's not, but if it is done, there's no real reason to criticize him. And if something is done all the time, and he's a half, then maybe you can ask him, you understand, but to criticize him, condemn him, then no per se, no reason for that.
What's the translation for jaiz?
Jaiz, something is permissible. Allowed. So that's concerning most of the masahil that is discussed regarding and other hadith to be discussing concerning the length of each salat that to be discussed in the hadith that comes after. But those are the main masahil regarding these particular hadiths.
Before you move on, it said that in the Zohar and Asr they will recite loud enough so they could hear it behind. Is that?
So sometimes sometimes in the Prophet that we read, sometimes they can hear what he was saying. So sometimes I said some explain to be that to show that generally it can be done, and that sometimes the Imam, if it is done unintentionally or somewhat you can overhear him reciting, there's no harm in that case. In this case, not it was taken that he did it intentionally to read aloud, but they could hear, some behind him could hear the recital because of their closeness to him, but that he was reading in a normal loud voice throughout the salat. So that some bits they could hear, and they can some use in showing that if the Imam, if you overhear the Imam, then there's no harm. But a normal thing that to read silently type of thing. But if you overhear some verses here and there, then there's no harm.
But what about the people behind the Imam? Because it's another issue now in the Masjid.
When I said behind the Imam,
yeah, they're making all noise and grunting and grumbling and making all mad noises. And where's that from?
After that, well, also we're discussing matters because we discussed that matter regarding concerning those behind what is was expected from them, regardless that behind the Imam generally they should be silent. You understand?
You heard that hadith and thought they took it the wrong way.
You understand? Most of that's the problem. I'm praying and leading the people, and they can hear the people behind, not the people.
Yeah, I know that.
You understand? But so that's the thing. So even concerning the salat, that even sometimes you hear the people saying that the takbirat very loud, and all the movement, that even they should be that loud. You understand? So the Imam is the one who is normally loud, where most can hear, or loud enough. But after the people generally can somewhat keep a low tone, or low volume. You understand?
So
they can hear themselves.
in the car of your neighbour.
Huh?
You shouldn't hear what your neighbour says.
And what it does, it should be that something that become repeated. Yes, something might overhear him. You understand? But it shouldn't be a regular practice. You understand? Some, without going to you understand that you might find some even they're reading their Faatiha, they're somewhat very loud. You understand? Where you understand they can be a bit disturbing for others. Because those praying behind, the general rule for them is that they should be quiet. But they read, but in a quiet form. But when it becomes too loud, you understand, then that becomes where, you understand, the thing that becomes disliked. It becomes tashwish, confusion for others, can confuse others.
What is this custom where sometimes when there's a large group, there may not be amplification, so when the Imam says Allahu Akbar, somebody else will then say it, and when they say Sami Allahu liman hamida, then they will say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Yeah, this is like Masjid Al Haram.
And so the practice regarding that person called Muballigh. Meaning concern is not if for whatever reason the Imam voice is not can carry.
Okay.
So you have someone will be there to carry is certain things from the Imam, the takbirat for the Imam, right? It's a matter to discuss in the bab of, I think we discussed, I mentioned somewhat in the bab of adhan. So in the bab of adhan, but coming salat or adhan, whichever of those chapters we're concerned that the muballigh that we find in some masajid, not to mention names, as you all know the names and the places of those masajid, that regarding concerning that you'll find a situation now in the Prophet when he was ill and he went out to pray, and then he joined the salat, and Abu Bakr, he was in Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr was the one was making, because it was somewhat a bit weak, because Abu Bakr was the one said was the Muballigh, he was saying that Allahu Akbar loud for everyone can hear. So they showed the permissibility of this act. But the thing that we find today is that in a case where the Imam voice cannot carry, is very low. The case that we have today, in certain some particular more renowned masajid, that the Muballigh is there, the Imam have about 10 different mics of the best one you can find in the dunya. Or more. You understand? Then you have this person who's saying exactly the same thing and there's no need. You understand? So the ulama said not that act, and said even some say the person do that even question his salat, it being valid. Because he's doing something where there's no need. He has 10 mic, the Imam already have 20, what's the need for you? You understand? So that act become question. I said the least to say it is something which is so the least concern that is of the thing that some mention becomes a bidah. It becomes something that constant practice when there's no need for muballigh, it becomes a bidah. That's the thing. You understand? So, and when you're praying those masajid, listen, it can be, they say, a tashwish for you, because the Imam says Allahu Akbar, and he Allahu Akbar, and you're thinking, we're going to stop so I can say my Allahu Akbar and move on. It becomes I said tashwish, just a disturbance for you, and there's no need. Because the Imam have enough, sufficient, the entire masjid can hear him without you. So why you need to be the second Imam? You understand? So that of those practice in those places that the people responsible need to look at. The people need to look at regarding, you understand, its purpose and its place in the Sharia. That's something that they need to look at between themselves and work out. Hey.
Last question, concerning the Salah again. Sometimes a particular Imam, he will recite the last 2 ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah.
Okay.
And there's an individual who always says Ameen in the middle of the Salah after those 2 ayat have been read.
Says Ameen after.
Loudly. Is there any grounds for this?
There is no grounds for that. Saying Ameen, Ameen only come after Faatiha, nothing else. And to be discussing some of the hadith to cover concern that to come soon regarding concern that the Prophet mentioned regarding that when ayat of ayat al-Rahman the person and ayat al-adab is mentioned, there's certain things that can be said. You seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favor and also adab of punishment of the nar. You seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's so when things of blessing is mentioned of genuine now you seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah, and things regarding punishment they seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protection. Now
internally or externally?
We will discuss that matter. So say but that mention that regarding it is not about saying Ameen. Even those hadith, it's not about saying Ameen after particular surah or ayat are read. And to say it aloud, Ameen is only said after Faatiha by the Imam and those behind.
Because the thing get annoying because I know it's coming and I'm just looking for this and then again he's putting you off your prayer again. What's this guy going to say next? Why? Why are you doing that?
I'm sorry, is it said after particular?
Yes. The last 2 ayats of Surah Al-Baqarah.
And then
I can understand why he's saying Ameen.
I've seen somebody say something at the end of Surah Al-Mulk.
Yeah, sometimes at certain verse, I might say certain things, but of those verses I mentioned concerning of either of concerning Allah Jannah or with Nar, they might say certain things, but to be discussed regarding in the you have a discussion regarding is it to be said in the compulsory salat or not. In a nafila, most of the things that I mentioned regarding the nafila, but as for the same ruling applies to compulsory, then that's where the discussion lies.
I find it's done. Train 6 minutes.
Okay, that's not a problem. There's always more.